I was 28 years old and 6 months into a vow of celibacy when the storm hit, and with it came a woman who would shatter every promise I'd made to myself. The wind was howling like a wounded animal against the windows of my cottage, rain hammering so hard I thought the glass might break, and I was wrapped in a blanket on my couch with chamomile tea and a book I couldn't focus on when I heard the desperate knocking at my door. 3 sharp raps that somehow cut through the chaos of the storm. I wasn't expecting anyone. I lived alone on the outskirts of a small coastal town, deliberately isolated after the disaster that had been my last relationship, and visitors were rare even in good weather. But there was something urgent about that knocking, something that made me set down my mug and cross the room despite every instinct telling me to stay safely inside. Before we dive deeper into this story, can you guess which coastal town became the setting for my life-changing moment? Drop your guess in the comments, and please hit that subscribe button to support the channel. Your subscription helps me share more stories like this one. Now let me tell you about the night everything changed. When I opened the door, I was nearly knocked backward by the force of the wind. Standing on my porch was a woman, completely drenched, shivering violently, with mascara running down her cheeks and wild auburn hair plastered to her face. She was wearing what had probably been an elegant black dress earlier in the evening, now clinging to her body and dripping onto my doorstep. Her eyes, even in the dim porch light, were striking, a deep amber color that reminded me of honey held up to sunlight. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said, her voice shaking from cold. "My car broke down about half a mile up the road and my phone is dead. I saw your light and I didn't know what else to do. I've been walking for 20 minutes and I'm freezing. Please, can I just use your phone?" I didn't hesitate. "Get inside now. You're going to catch pneumonia." She stumbled across the threshold, leaving a trail of water, and I quickly shut the door against the storm. Up close, I could see she was around my age, maybe a year or two younger, with delicate features and full lips that were turning slightly blue from the cold. She wrapped her arms around herself, trembling so hard her teeth chattered. "Stay right here," I said, already moving toward my bedroom. "I'm getting you dry clothes and towels." "Don't argue." I grabbed an oversized sweatshirt, soft pajama pants, thick socks, and every towel I could find. When I returned to the living room, she was still standing exactly where I'd left her, looking miserable and lost. I handed her the stack of items. "Bathroom is down the hall. First door on the left. Take a hot shower. As hot as you can stand. Get out of those wet clothes and leave them in the tub. I'll make you something warm to drink." "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm Eliza, by the way." "I'm Grace. Now go warm up before you turn into an icicle." While she showered, I made hot chocolate, the real kind with actual melted chocolate and whole milk, topped with whipped cream. I also threw together a quick grilled cheese sandwich because she looked like she needed sustenance. My cottage was small but cozy, just one bedroom with an open living area and kitchen, a bathroom, and a tiny office space I used for my freelance editing work. I'd moved here 8 months ago, after ending a 3-year relationship with a man named Derek who had cheated on me with his coworker. The betrayal had been devastating, but what hurt more was realizing I felt more relieved than heartbroken when it ended. That's when I'd made my vow of celibacy. 1 full year, no dating, no romance, no physical intimacy of any kind. I needed time to heal, to figure out who I was outside of a relationship, to understand why every romantic connection I ever had felt like wearing shoes that were the wrong size. I dated exclusively men my whole life, had convinced myself that the lack of spark was normal, that passion faded and comfort was what mattered. But after Derek, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Something fundamental had been missing in all my relationships, and I needed space to figure out what. Eliza emerged from the bathroom looking like a different person. Her hair was towel-dried and falling in damp waves around her shoulders, her face clean of makeup revealing a smattering of freckles across her nose. She was swimming in my clothes, the sweatshirt hanging off one shoulder, and somehow she looked absolutely beautiful. My heart did this weird flutter thing in my chest that I immediately tried to ignore. "Thank you so much," she said, accepting the mug of hot chocolate gratefully. "You're a literal lifesaver." I was starting to think I might actually die out there. "Sit down. Eat," I said, gesturing to the couch and handing her the sandwich. Tell me what happened. She settled onto the couch, curling her legs under her, and taking a bite of the sandwich like she hadn't eaten in days. I was driving back from a wedding in Portland. My cousin's wedding, actually, which was beautiful but also kind of depressing because everyone kept asking when I was going to settle down. I'm 27, and apparently that means I'm running out of time according to my family. I laughed, settling into the armchair across from her. I get that. Family expectations are the worst, right? Anyway, I was about an hour from home when my car just died. No warning, no sputtering, just completely dead. And of course, this is the one time I forgot to charge my phone before leaving. The storm was already starting, and I tried to wait it out in the car, but it got so cold. I could see your light from the road and I just started walking. I'm so grateful you answered the door. Where's home for you? Seattle. I work as a music teacher at a middle school. What about you? What brings you to this corner of the world? I needed a fresh start, I said simply. Bad breakup, wanted to get away from the city and focus on myself for a while. I do freelance editing, mostly manuscripts and academic papers, so I can work from anywhere. The hermit life, Eliza said with a small smile. I respect that. We talked as she finished her food and hot chocolate, the conversation flowing easily despite being complete strangers. She told me about her students, the challenges of teaching music in an era where arts funding was constantly being cut, her love for classical piano and contemporary indie folk. I told her about the books I was working on, my tiny cottage garden that was probably being destroyed by the storm, my cat Mr. Darcy who was currently hiding under my bed because he hated thunder. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Rain continued to pound against the windows, and the power flickered twice, making us both hold our breath until it stabilized. Eliza checked her phone, which I'd plugged into charge, but there was no signal. I should call a tow truck once the storm passes, she said, though she didn't sound enthusiastic about leaving the warmth of the cottage. You can try. But honestly, in weather like this, no one's coming out tonight. You should stay here. I have a couch that's actually pretty comfortable and it's not safe to be out there. Are you sure? I don't want to impose. You're not imposing. Besides, Mr. Darcy will be devastated if you leave. He loves company once he gets over his initial terror. As if on cue, a large orange tabby emerged from the hallway, eyeing Eliza suspiciously before deciding she was acceptable and jumping onto the couch beside her. She laughed, a sound that was warm and genuine, and started petting him. He immediately started purring like a motorboat. He never warms up to people that fast, I said, genuinely surprised. I have a way with animals. They can sense I'm harmless. We settled in for the evening, and I pulled out a deck of cards. We played gin rummy and talked about everything and nothing. She told me about growing up with 4 siblings in a chaotic household where music was the only way to get any peace. I told her about being an only child raised by my grandmother after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. She shared her worst dating stories, and I matched them with my own disasters. Okay, but have you ever had someone propose to you on the second date? Eliza asked, laughing as she laid down her cards. No, but I did have a guy show up at my apartment with a puppy he'd bought for us after we'd been dating for 3 weeks. A puppy? As a surprise. Who does that? What did you do? Kept the puppy. Dumped the guy. Her name was Rosie and she lived to be 14. We laughed until our sides hurt, and I realized with a start that I hadn't felt this comfortable with someone in years. There was something about Eliza that put me at ease, made me want to share things I usually kept private. And there was something else too, something I was trying very hard not to acknowledge. The way my eyes kept drifting to her lips when she talked. The flutter in my stomach when she laughed. The hyper-awareness of how close we were sitting as the night wore on. Around midnight, I made up the couch with blankets and pillows while Eliza brushed her teeth with a spare toothbrush I'd given her. The storm had downgraded from catastrophic to merely terrible, still raining heavily but without the violent wind. When she came back to the living room, looking soft and sleepy in my oversized clothes, I felt that flutter again, stronger this time. Thank you again for everything, she said. You didn't have to be this kind. Of course I did. What kind of person would I be if I left you out in that storm? Still, a lot of people wouldn't have opened the door. We stood there for a moment, the air between us feeling charged with something I couldn't quite name. Or maybe I could name it, I just didn't want to. Because naming it would mean acknowledging the attraction I was feeling, and that would mean breaking my vow of celibacy and confronting feelings I'd been running from for years. "Good night, Eliza," I said softly. "Good night, Grace." I retreated to my bedroom but found I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the rain and thinking about the woman on my couch. Thinking about how easy it had been to talk to her, how her laugh made me smile, how beautiful she looked in my clothes. I'd never felt this way about any of the men I dated. This immediate, overwhelming attraction. This desire to know everything about someone. This feeling like I'd been waiting for her without knowing it. At some point, I must have dozed off because I woke to pale morning light filtering through my curtains and the smell of coffee brewing. I pulled on a robe and padded out to the living room to find Eliza in the kitchen, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, humming as she made breakfast. "I hope you don't mind," she said when she saw me. I found eggs and bread and figured I'd make us breakfast as a thank you. "Your coffee maker is very intuitive. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. Besides, I'm a stress baker and cooker. Keeps my hands busy." We ate scrambled eggs and toast together at my small kitchen table, and in the morning light, with the storm past and sunshine starting to break through the clouds, everything felt different, more real somehow. Less like a dream and more like something that might actually matter. "I should probably check on my car," Eliza said reluctantly. "And call that tow truck. Let me drive you. We can see what the situation is." We piled into my old Subaru and drove the half-mile to where her car sat abandoned on the shoulder of the road. It was a sensible Honda Civic that looked sad and lifeless in the aftermath of the storm. Eliza tried the ignition a few times, but nothing happened. "I'll call my mechanic," she said with a sigh. "He's in Seattle though, so it might be a while before he can get out here." The mechanic said he couldn't make it until the next day at the earliest. The storm had caused damage throughout the region and he was backed up with emergency calls. Eliza looked torn, clearly not wanting to impose further but also not having many options. "Stay another night," I heard myself say. "Seriously, it's not a problem. You can't just sit here with your car waiting for a tow truck. Grace, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Besides, Mr. Darcy will be heartbroken if you leave." She laughed, that same warm sound from the night before. "Well, if it's for Mr. Darcy's sake." We spent the day together in a way that felt remarkably natural. I worked on a manuscript that had a tight deadline while Eliza graded papers on her phone, both of us sitting in companionable silence at my kitchen table. We made lunch together, pasta with vegetables from my garden that had miraculously survived the storm. In the afternoon, she asked if I had a piano, and I showed her my grandmother's old upright in the corner of the living room. "May I?" she asked, and when I nodded, she sat down and began to play. I'd heard music before, obviously, but I'd never experienced it the way I experienced Eliza playing. Her fingers moved across the keys with such grace and emotion that I felt it in my chest, in my bones. She played Chopin and Debussy and then switched to something contemporary. A Sufjan Stevens song that made me want to cry for reasons I couldn't explain. When she finished, there were actual tears on my cheeks. "That was beautiful," I whispered. She turned to look at me, and there was something intense in her amber eyes. Music is the only way I know how to say the things I couldn't put into words. "What were you trying to say just now?" "That sometimes the most important moments in life are the ones we don't plan for. That sometimes a storm brings you exactly where you need to be." The air felt thick with meaning, with possibility. I wanted to cross the room and kiss her more than I'd ever wanted anything. But I was frozen, caught between desire and fear, between this overwhelming attraction and the vow I'd made to myself. Eliza stood up from the piano bench. "Grace, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why did you really make that vow of celibacy?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't told her about the vow explicitly, but I must have mentioned it in passing the night before. I sat down on the couch, and she joined me, sitting close enough that our knees almost touched. "After my last relationship ended, I realized I'd never really taken time to be alone," I began slowly. I'd gone from one relationship to another since college, never stopping to figure out who I was by myself. And every relationship felt wrong somehow, like I was forcing something that should have been natural. I thought if I took time away from dating, from intimacy, I could figure out what was missing. And have you figured it out? I looked at her, really looked at her, and something inside me cracked open. I think I'm starting to. Grace, she said softly, I need to tell you something. When I walked up to your door last night, I was running from more than just the storm. I'd just come from a wedding where I'd watched my cousin marry a man she clearly loved, and all I could think about was how I'd never felt that way about any of the men I'd dated. My family kept pressuring me about settling down, and I kept thinking about how I'd rather be alone forever than spend my life pretending. My heart was pounding. Pretending what? Pretending to be straight. She said it quietly but firmly. I've known for years that I'm attracted to women, but I've been terrified to admit it out loud, to myself, to my family, to anyone. But then I met you, and for the first time in my life, I didn't want to pretend anymore. The confession hung in the air between us. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump into unknown waters. Everything suddenly made sense. Why my relationships with men had always felt wrong. Why I'd never experienced real passion or desire. Why in less than 24 hours, I felt more for Eliza than I'd felt for anyone in my entire life. I think I might be gay, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I've been trying not to think about it, trying to focus on my vow and my healing. But the truth is, I've never been attracted to men the way I'm attracted to you. And that terrifies me. Eliza reached out and took my hand, her touch sending electricity up my arm. It's terrifying for me too, but maybe we could be terrified together? I laughed, a shaky sound that was half sob. I made a vow. No dating, no intimacy, for a full year. I'm only 6 months in. I'm not asking you to break your vow, Eliza said gently. I'm just asking if I can get to know you better. If we can talk on the phone, maybe see each other again. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people figuring things out. It was the most reasonable suggestion in the world, and yet it felt momentous. Like agreeing to this would set me on a completely different path than the one I'd been walking. But maybe that was exactly what I needed. I'd like that, I said. She smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. Me too. We spent the rest of that day and evening talking about everything, our childhoods, our fears, our dreams. She told me about coming out to her best friend in college and the relief of being accepted. I told her about always feeling like an outsider in my own relationships, like I was observing my life from a distance. We talked about the pressure to conform, the fear of disappointing family, the journey of accepting yourself when the world tells you who you're supposed to be. That night, lying in my bed while Eliza slept on the couch again, I felt different. Lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't know was there and had finally set it down. I was attracted to women. I was attracted to Eliza specifically. And maybe that was okay. Maybe that was actually perfect. The mechanic arrived the next morning and was able to fix Eliza's car relatively quickly, a problem with the alternator. As she prepared to leave, we exchanged phone numbers, both of us lingering by her car like neither of us wanted to say goodbye. Call me when you get home safely, I asked. I will. And, Grace? Thank you. For everything. For opening your door. For your kindness. For listening. Thank you for showing up during a storm and turning my whole world upside down. She laughed and, on impulse, leaned in and kissed my cheek. It was brief, innocent, but it sent warmth flooding through my entire body. Then she got in her car and drove away, and I stood in my driveway watching until she disappeared from view. True to her word, Eliza called that evening to let me know she'd made it home safely. What started as a quick check-in turned into a 3-hour conversation about everything and nothing. It became a pattern. We talked every day, sometimes for hours, sometimes just quick texts throughout the day. We sent each other photos, stupid memes, voice messages. She told me about her students and difficult coworkers. I told her about the manuscripts I was editing and Mr. Darcy's latest antics. 2 weeks after the storm, she asked if she could visit for the weekend. I said yes before I'd even consciously decided to, and spent the next 3 days nervously cleaning my cottage and planning meals and trying not to overthink what it meant. When she arrived Friday evening, pulling up in her Honda Civic with an overnight bag, I felt those same butterflies I'd felt during the storm. But this time they felt less like fear and more like excitement. She hugged me when she got out of the car, and I held on maybe a bit longer than strictly necessary. "I've missed you," she said into my hair. "I've missed you too." We fell back into the same easy rhythm we'd found during the storm. We cooked dinner together, laughing as we tried to follow a recipe neither of us understood. We played cards and board games. She played piano while I curled up on the couch with Mr. Darcy and just listened. And we endlessly talked, about our fears and hopes and the journey we were both on. On Saturday night, we watched the sunset from my tiny back porch, sitting side by side on the steps with glasses of wine. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the ocean in the distance glittered like it was covered in diamonds. "Grace, can I tell you something?" Eliza asked. "Always. I'm falling for you. I know we're taking things slow and I respect your vow, but I need you to know how I feel. You've changed my life. Knowing you has made me braver, more honest with myself. And I want to see where this goes, whatever that looks like." My heart felt like it might burst out of my chest. "I'm falling for you too. You scare me in the best way because you make me want to be honest about who I am. And I think I'm ready to admit that I'm a lesbian. That I've probably always been a lesbian. I just couldn't see it before." Eliza took my hand, lacing our fingers together. "There's no rush. You can take all the time you need to figure things out. What if I don't want to wait anymore?" The words surprised me even as I said them. What if the vow of celibacy was really just me running from the truth about myself? What if what I actually needed wasn't to be alone, but to find the right person to help me see who I really am? "What are you saying?" I turned to face her fully, my heart pounding but my mind clear. "I'm saying that vows are meant to be broken when they no longer serve us. I'm saying that I want to kiss you and I want to date you and I want to figure out this whole being a lesbian thing with you by my side. Are you sure?" Eliza asked, her amber eyes searching mine. "I've never been more sure of anything." She smiled, that radiant smile I'd come to love, and leaned in slowly, giving me time to change my mind. But I didn't want to change my mind. I wanted this more than I'd wanted anything in my entire life. Our lips met in a kiss that was soft and sweet and perfect, and I felt everything click into place. This was what had been missing. This feeling, this connection, this rightness. We kissed until the sun had fully set and stars were appearing in the sky, until we were both breathless and grinning like teenagers. When we finally pulled apart, Eliza rested her forehead against mine. "So I guess this means we're dating now?" she asked. "I guess it does. Is that okay with you?" "More than okay." "It's perfect." We spent the rest of that weekend in a blissful bubble, holding hands, stealing kisses, talking about what our future might look like. It wasn't all easy. We both had fears to work through, internalized homophobia to unpack, families to potentially come out to, but we agreed to face it together. That was 8 months ago. In that time, I've come out to my grandmother, who surprised me by being incredibly supportive and immediately asking when she could meet Eliza. Eliza came out to her family, which was harder, her parents struggling with the news but slowly coming around. We've navigated the challenges of her living in Seattle while I'm on the coast, taking turns visiting each other on weekends and planning for a future where we might live in the same city. But more importantly, I've discovered who I am. I'm Grace, I'm 29 years old, and I'm a lesbian. I'm in love with an incredible woman who showed up at my door during a storm and changed my entire life. I'm part of a community I never knew I belonged to, surrounded by other queer women who have shared their stories and wisdom. I'm happier and more authentic than I've ever been. My vow of celibacy ended up lasting exactly 6 months and 2 weeks. Broken not because I was weak or impatient, but because I finally understood what I'd really been seeking. I didn't need to be alone to find myself. I needed to be honest. I needed to stop running from the truth. I needed to open my door when someone knocked, even in the middle of a storm. Eliza and I are planning to move in together next month. She got a job teaching music at a school in a town about 30 minutes from my cottage, Close enough that we can both keep the lives we've built while also building a life together. We're talking about getting a dog, maybe a golden retriever we'd name after a literary character. We're planning trips to pride festivals we've never been to, ready to celebrate our identities openly. Last week, we went back to the spot on the road where her car broke down. We parked and walked to where she'd started her journey to my cottage, and we took a photo together with the ocean in the background. Do you ever think about what would have happened if your car hadn't broken down? I asked as we stood there. All the time, Eliza admitted. But I also think that maybe it was supposed to happen. Maybe the universe knew we both needed each other at that exact moment. I don't know if I believe in fate, I said. Neither do I, really. But I believe in storms that force us to seek shelter. I believe in the kindness of strangers who become something more. I believe that sometimes the scariest moments lead to the most beautiful outcomes. She was right. My lesbian era didn't begin with a grand revelation or a lightning bolt moment of clarity. It began with a knock on my door during a storm, with a woman seeking shelter who would end up showing me the way home to myself. It began with breaking a vow I'd made for the wrong reasons and making a new promise to live authentically. Sometimes I think about how close I came to not answering the door that night. I'd been cozy on my couch, safe in my solitude, committed to my path of celibacy and self-discovery. If I'd ignored the knocking, if I'd been too scared or too committed to my vow, I would have missed everything. I would have missed Eliza, missed this love, missed discovering my true self, but I did answer the door. I let in the storm and the woman who came with it, and in doing so, I let in the possibility of becoming who I was always meant to be. My grandmother told me recently that she'd always suspected I might be gay, that there was a lightness in me now that had never been there before. She said I seemed like I was finally inhabiting my own life instead of watching it from the outside. That's exactly what it feels like. Like I've stepped into full color after years of living in grayscale. Like I found a language I didn't know I was missing. Like I've come home after a lifetime of wandering. To anyone out there who is questioning their sexuality, who feels like something doesn't quite fit, who has spent years trying to force themselves into a mold that wasn't made for them, I want you to know that it's never too late. I was 28 when I figured out I was gay. Some people know when they're teenagers, some not until they're much older. There's no right timeline, no wrong way to discover your truth. And if you've made vows to yourself, promises about who you'll be or what you'll do, don't be afraid to break them when they no longer serve you. Growth means being willing to change direction, to admit when you were wrong about yourself, to choose a new path even when it's terrifying. My lesbian era began after my vow of celibacy, the night Eliza arrived seeking shelter from the storm. But really, it began the moment I decided to be honest with myself, to stop running from who I am, to open the door to possibility. And I've never looked back. Eliza is in the kitchen right now, making dinner, humming the way she always does. And Mr. Darcy is winding around her ankles begging for treats. Soon we'll eat together and talk about our days and make plans for the weekend. It's simple and domestic and absolutely perfect. This is the life I was always meant to live. I just needed a storm to show me the way.